Welcome to the Association of Justice and Treatment Professionals and the International Association of Treatment Court Professionals webinar. We welcome you to today's webinar, and the topic today is drug treatment courts, the why, the how, and the impacts. We are going to hear from three esteemed panelists today: Judie Birns. And Judie describes herself very briefly. I'm just going to read from what she sent me. She said, Judie's background is in addiction treatment, having managed residential detox and treatment for many years. And Judie is currently the manager of the Regina Drug Treatment Court. And then Grace Froese. She is the director, Edmonton Drug Treatment Court Service. She's a liaison and director of training and development in partnership with Alberta Justice and Solicitor General Provincial DTC expansion. The province of Alberta has decided to commit to setting up 5 new drug treatment courts, and Grace is very involved in that process. Grace has also been involved, is currently serves with the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals, the International Association of Treatment Court Professionals, and has been involved in several educational activities that have been organized by the Organization of American States. Also, I should say that Judie is also very involved in the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals. And from the Calgary Drug Treatment Court, there's Arla, Liska. Arla has 30 years of experience in the provision of human services, ranging from direct services to the executive management and consulting. As a consultant to the Calgary non-NGOs for 10 years. She has assisted in evaluation design and implementation, research, program design and development, strategic planning, and multidisciplinary partnership. She has consulted to a variety of sectors, primarily addictions, criminal justice, children's services, and domestic violence. For the past 8 years, she has worked as the CEO of the Calgary Drug Treatment Court. Arla is passionate. She's a passionate advocate for drug treatment courts. Her experience supporting and starting of the Calgary Drug Treatment Court in 2007 to 2008. And she's now the chief executive officer of that court. And this provides her with a solid basis for understanding the processes involved in developing a highly effective drug treatment court. Now, I'm just going to remind panelists to mute their microphones, and also we'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. And make sure to use the Q&A button. We'd love to hear from you. So use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Send us questions and we'll interact with you. The Association of Justice and Treatment Professionals, as well as the International Association of Treatment Court Professionals, are committed to trying to provide a forum to exchange best practices with respect to areas where justice and treatment intersect. The IATCP tends to focus a lot on treatment court professionals. The AJTP focuses on treatment courts and also other types of interventions. Be sure to connect with us, find out what is happening. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn. We also have a mailing list. And don't hesitate to let us know of any topics that you want us to cover. We'll be very happy to do so. Now that I've said all this, I should just indicate that this session is being recorded. It will be available on the website some 5 to 7 days from today. The organizing committee, my name is Justice Birns. Jennifer Graham is an assistant crown attorney in Peel. Andrea River, Judie counsel, legal aid. Kim Briggs, Justice Services, case manager at the Canadian Mental Health Association, Elgin County. Erin Smith, counselor and case manager at the Peel Addiction Assessment and Referral Center. Jessica DeCuna, counselor and case manager at Peel Addiction Assessment and Referral Center. We are your organizing committee. Now that we have been joined by a number of people and we have gathered here, it's now time to do the land acknowledgement, and Erin Smith will do that.
Hello, everyone. So before we begin, we would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather and which the region of Peel operates. It is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants.
Thank you, Erin. And now, I think I'll turn to Judie to start us off.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start us off by talking a bit about why I love drug courts so much and why I believe they are a great option for addicted offenders. Most offenders are presenting with complex mental health, substance abuse, and addiction issues. For example, upon admission, 80% of federally sentenced male offenders have a substance abuse problem, and nearly 2/3 reported that they were under the influence of substances during the commission of their offense. This came from the Correctional Investigator of Canada Annual Report 2014. So when you have these individuals hit the system, they are either incarcerated or released on conditions which would include completion of an addiction treatment program out in the community. I worked in treatment and detox up until I started at the Regina Drug Treatment Court in 2009, and used to get calls from individuals who were sitting in a cell and reevaluating their life. That is where their heads started to clear. They're sick, they're tired, they've burnt all their bridges in many cases. A number of my participants have told me they were very happy they got arrested because it actually saved them. One participant related to me, he was laying in cuffs on a garage floor and was relieved to be caught so he could rest because he'd been high for days, not eating or sleeping. One young woman would only shoplift when high, and she was always high. They don't know how to stop. They don't know how, and they want to. Drug court provides that option. So in my time in residential treatment, we found that we had a revolving clientele, same as the courts have. They came in, they worked hard, they left with the best intentions and some tools that they could gather in the length of the treatment program, which could be anywhere from 28 to 36 days. But they would return to the same community, same life conditions, and could not stay clean. So the treatment option only deals with the addiction as well. And there are so many other pieces to the puzzle. These are complex individuals. They need a range of care and a tailored treatment program. And a big piece of this would be the criminal thinking piece. It's vital to success going forward. Some statistics from the Treatment Research Institute about treatment. If we just send them through the treatment system, half or more don't show up for intake. 40 to 80% drop out within 3 months. So this would be within the treatment program and then aftercare pieces. 90% drop out in 12 months. If we just put them in jail, studies have shown that 68% are arrested for a new crime within 3 years, 47% convicted of a new crime, 25% incarcerated for a new crime, and 50% reincarcerated for violations. 95% relapse to substance abuse. So crime and violence associated with illegal drug use has an enormous effect on the criminal justice system. They are also seeing the same revolving door. So drug courts were developed to help with that and address the crimes and the drug use. They combine judicial supervision with drug treatment as an alternative to incarceration to try and break that cycle. So through monitoring, supervision, we also have, we can use legal sanctions. We have leverage to encourage drug abusers to enter and remain in the program. The carrot and the stick approach works, and we find many more respond to the carrot approach. So when they're doing really well, we keep rewarding that. It requires the cooperation and coordination of two very distinct cultures. You've got treatment on one hand, and you've got the justice system on the other hand. So the treatment, people are all about trying to help that individual and get them what they need. And then the criminal justice system in the past has been all about trying to punish that person to stop them from doing what they were doing. So coming together as a group is a challenge, but I find it really exciting because it works really well when we're both on the same playing field, and we're doing what we can to help the client, who is the focus of this. Lots of times the drug court option I find is needed because the person is not someone who would seek treatment. When I interview applicants, many have never either stopped to think about stopping their use or going to access any services. So stopping that's for whatever length of time that they're sitting in remand, and getting them to start thinking about making that change is huge and really important. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that people who get treatment due to some kind of legal pressure tend to keep their treatment appointments more frequently than other people who are not under legal pressure. They tend to stay in treatment longer. They know that they must achieve sobriety to move forward in the program. They want to do well. They want the judge to see their progress. So it's a program that really involves everybody in moving that participant forward. If they do not complete drug court, they would be sentenced to some jail time. But if they do complete, they graduate and move on with their lives. If they want to change, this is the opportunity that they have. Drug court is a year or more in length. So length of treatment is really important, especially around the crystal meth. It takes a long time for the brain to clear and people to get focused. So the longer the program, the better. As I said earlier, treatment centers sort of focus on the addiction piece. Drug courts look at the treatment plan based on criminogenic thinking. So antisocial attitudes, antisocial friends and peers, personality patterns, substance abuse, family or marital problems, lack of education, poor employment history, and lack of pro-social leisure activity. So all these pieces need to come together to support that client, because if they only work on one area and go back out into the community, nothing will change, right? They're still going to have issues in those other areas. Spending time behind the bars does little to support those with substance use disorders. It gives them a timeout before releasing them back to that environment without any tools to help them stay away from substances. If anything, people often return to their old way with a new method to avoid getting caught again. Lots of them learn many tricks of the trade while they are sitting in jail with others. The treatment component works at providing individuals with tools they can rely on, but due to the length and design, are not able to go into the other areas. That's a very short period of time to try and address a person's entire life and get some sort of long-term goals in place. Treatment does have a rule that if you use in treatment, you are removed. We don't do that in drug court. We are aware that these people are addicted and have issues with staying clean, and we have access to detox, brief and social detox as well. So we use that when we need to. Our drug court target is high risk, high need, and they are struggling to remain clean. Many times I hear from our participants that they're more addicted to the crime than they are the drugs. After a while, they clean up and they're missing that rush. It was exciting to go out and do crime. One participant told me he would sit in a driveway in a car that he was stealing and wait for the owner to come to the door or the window and then speed away because it gave him that excitement. It was even better if the person came to the window or the door with a gun. That gave him even more excitement. This is a high that drugs cannot give. So we need to really address that thinking and that behavior. One intervention that we found to address that is called moral recognition therapy. It's a behavioral therapy aimed at decreasing the likelihood of someone returning to abusing substances or alcohol. It teaches people in the criminal justice system with substance use disorders to focus on the moral aspects of their illness and the social consequences. We've had good success with that. Drug courts also look at trying to find employment upon release. We have various tracks. Someone will go into that later, but in the end of the program, they're usually in school or at work. So we work with people that will be able to help them find employment so that they can have some long-term success, because if they cannot find a job, that's really going to impact them. So we work with organizations or employers who take criminal records into consideration, and they're much more likely to find employment rather than after leaving a jail or a prison trying to access that. We do have a graduate who is a foreman of a construction company. He hires our participants and graduates. And when they are on the road, they do lots of self-help meetings, and the crew is clean and get lots of work done. So we find our people helping each other out. There is also not much of a bridge between time between bars and reintegrating into the real world. So if they're sitting in jail and they're ending the time, there's not a lot of ability to do a transition plan. Whereas in drug court, we have them for over a year. They're in the different tracks and we're working with them to move forward. Common triggers, running into former using buddies or visiting places. While they're in the community in drug court, we teach them how to deal with that. They run into problems, they come back, we talk about it, we develop plans. So there's all these aspects that need to be looked at, whereas people who are incarcerated or in a residential treatment program don't have access to those triggers and don't have the opportunity to practice how they are going to deal with those. Developing peer support systems such as alumni groups or peer support workers is another plus for drug courts. I find that our alumni or their peers have way more impact on them than we do many times. They see these people that are out in the community working that they used to buy from or use with or sell for, and they look at them and go, well, if they can do this, so can I. So drug courts encourage that peer support, and it gives them some inspiration in how they can do that in their life. So drug courts are a supervised, long-term, community-based wraparound program that provides structure, routine, and an individualized treatment plan. When I first heard about drug courts, a judge in Regina wanted a drug court, and I was on a committee that was working on that. I started to explore it, and to me, this was more the answer coming from a treatment background. It was very frustrating not to have any ability to work with these people longer or in other areas to build on their ability to be successful. So that was really exciting to me, and I ended up coming back and working in the drug court after my treatment and detox areas. 12 years I've been there. I'm trying to find the perfect recipe. I want to find what turns the light on, because you can see that when people get it and decide they want to change and stay that way. So I work with my colleagues at the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Courts. They're always a good resource. I want to find out who's doing what, who's got something new going on that's working, or a promising practice that might be out there. So we stay in touch and work with each other on that. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Grace, who's going to go into more depth on how they operate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judie. It's just great to be here. I want to say thank you to Justice Birns for organizing this and for these webinars. They're so inspiring. I've been watching a few of them, and it was amazing. I just have to speak to this briefly. Paulette Walker, I remember, I think that was the first webinar, and listening to her speak. And you know, in all my years, I have had a lengthy career working with justice and working with the drug courts now. And it's always inspiring. Her story was such a powerful story. of resilience and hope, and that there's and now she's offering hope to others in the drug treatment court. There was another lady, Nicole, that presented, and even the Paul Bentley Memorial Series was so amazing. Just hearing about the pioneers who dared to create this justice and treatment partnership in Canada, which is so amazing. So Kofi, thank you for this, and I appreciate that you continue to do this work and inspire. Something that Judie mentioned here too, that Judie just mentioned, she said she finds this so exciting. It's so amazing to immerse yourself in something that really is truly exciting. And drug treatment courts are, I feel the same way. There's not a day that I don't feel inspired by the work that we're doing, knowing that this is having such a positive impact for people that are in the justice system. And you know, that's what just, so I'm going to talk about how we do this, give an overview on how we deliver this. And it's through this integrated partnership, basically a marriage between justice, treatment, and the community. And how that therapeutic relationship works between the courts, the community, the treatment team, and understanding the participant is key to creating this change, and we're giving them that ultimate opportunity for success. That's such an exciting opportunity as professionals to be working in this field. And I've worked in the field of justice, correctional services for the majority of my career. I've worked as an addictions counselor for over 10 years and worked with specialized initiatives. And then over 7 years ago, took over this role with the Edmonton Drug Treatment Court. And it's been the most amazing opportunity to see all these partnerships come together, something I'd always hoped I could do. And, you know, when I think one of the things when we talk about how we do this, we have to remember also what it is not. And it's not regular probation where people, you know, and our participants will say how they assume that's what they're coming to at first sometimes. Oh, I show up and then you're going to tell me to do something and I'm probably not going to do it. And in a month, I'm going to show up again. And then we're going to talk about the fact that I should have done this and so on. And that's how they talk about this. This is not regular probation. This is not regular court appearances. These are court interactions where you're interacting with the judiciary. And this is such a great opportunity for growth and for a positive court experience for participants. And it's the community program. It's not a drop-in community program. This is an intense program where staff and the whole team are so highly invested. And participants are held accountable. There's so much accountability. And this is ultimately about keeping communities safe and ensuring that people are accountable through ongoing court appearances, that intensive judicial supervision, the mandatory drug testing and sanctions and rewards. It is intense, and there is such a high level of accountability. And one of the things when we talk about accountability in the drug screening is one of our graduates had said, never knowing for sure when I would have to do a drug screen is the only thing that stopped me from using at the very start. And I did not want to disappoint the judge. I had never had a judge that believed in me before. And that just speaks to the meaningful dialogue that someone has in court and that they have with the judge. The next thing is important to focus on here is the timely access and the continuity of care. Participants are identified early and placed in the drug treatment court as promptly and reasonably as early as is reasonably possible. There is a streamlined process that allows for early identification. When defense submits the application to the Crown, as soon as possible after charges. That's not always the case, depending on circumstances, but the goal is to do this as early as possible, and followed by immediate access. Hopefully, the acceptance into the program. They can enter their pleas and get started, and go from detox to treatment to supportive community housing. This is where normally we see so many gaps in our systems. This is where people fall through the cracks. These individuals are high risk, high needs. They're people that need intervention. And Judie alluded to this, how how, they'll go into treatment, and everybody goes into treatment going, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm excited. I've learned all this stuff. But now they're leaving treatment after, whether it's 28, 42 days, 3 months, whatever it is, they're leaving. They're going, okay, but now what? And even the best laid plans can fall apart very quickly, especially for someone who is used to living in addiction. So this smooth transition through all these steps is what really helps to fill those gaps and prevents people from falling through the cracks. And one of our new participants recently had said, I've never stayed clean after detox because I went right back to the streets, and I would never show up for treatment because the time frame between detox and treatment was too long, or from treatment to accessing a recovery bed and accessing recovery housing was always such a lengthy time period. So in this approach, we're focused on a collaborative approach that is integrating addictions treatment with justice system case processing and individual case management. And that is key. All the partners involved here in this marriage are in constant communication. Very, very important that this happens. Participants are guided through this comprehensive treatment plan. Every aspect of their life is reviewed. And it's looked at what are realistic and obtainable goals for our participant, and how can we work to help them to attain these goals. Sometimes we'll just say, what did you want to do before drugs took over your life? What did you imagine your life could look like? And how can we help you move back to that place? Or how can we help you open that door? They may have never thought about it. For many, their reality as young people, that wasn't even in the scope of their reality, that they could ever have an amazing normal life. I'm going to use an example of one of my current staff at the Edmonton Drug Treatment Court. He's a graduate from 7 years ago, and he is in his 50s now, and he works as a full-time mentor, overseeing the mentorship with the participants, peer support. He's developed a lot of culturally focused programs. His name is Donnie, and he's a great example of goals. He had been a product of the child welfare system right from age 12 into the youth justice system and adult system from there. So he came into drug court in his early 50s, and he didn't have a clue what a normal life looks like. He said, I've seen other people and what they do, but he never knew, well, how do I even get that? Because he had never been exposed to that personally. So when he came into drug court, he set these goals. What do I want my life to look like? He couldn't fathom what normalcy would be for him. And today he's employed full time. He has his social work diploma. He's working on a social work degree. He has he said one of his things was, okay, I need a full-time permanent job with a pension and benefits. He achieved that. And just last week, he bought a home, his first home ever. These are things that were unimaginable for him. It was just out of his scope of reality. But when he came into drug treatment court, the question is, what would you want your life to look like? And those were his goals, and he's accomplishing them. So that's what makes this so rewarding and so exciting. And the individual treatment plans are delivered through a community case management team in most places, with community professional supports and supervised by probation, police services, and the courts. This multidisciplinary team works collaboratively to support this case plan. And, we work to adapt to each person's plan and needs. So we have a 5-phase program. Most programs do have a phase where they gradually work their way through, but you also have to adapt. We recently had a lady who is only in phase 2, and in our particular program, they're not allowed any out-of-town visits or traveling until they're in phase 3. But in phase 2, one of the biggest things is she wanted to reconnect with her culture. Very important to her, and there was a traditional Sundance taking place out of town. Well, in a case like this, the team got together and said, there needs to be an exception here. This is important for her growth and her development. And so that was approved, of course. So there's each case plan is individual, although there are phases that guide it. It is important that we look at what each person needs to move forward. So in supports for reconnection, social inclusion, that's where, the phases, of course, of treatment are so important. But we talk about the comprehensive supports, addictions treatment, detox, residential day programs, so many different programs, therapeutic counseling and support, psychologists, therapists, therapeutic responses that address the issues behind the addiction. So important. And something else that Judie just touched on too is the criminogenic and distorted thinking and behaviors need to be addressed. We need to look at criminal thinking and how the mind has become programmed to respond. One of our graduates had said, he said, I always thought that if I could just get off the drugs, that I would never do crime again. I didn't even know that my mind thought about crime all the time until I took the criminal addictive thinking course in drug court. So that's such a key component to address. Community integration program to, just ensuring that they're learning to function in the community as a person in recovery and a person that's building a life in recovery. Very important. Learning to give back, establishing healthy friendships and relationships, things that we just do in life for many people is new. How do I do this? And building a healthy lifestyle. We're very fortunate. We have a volunteer life skills coach with our drug court program, and he plays such an influential role in helping participants establish what does life look like as a healthy person just living in the community. So such important aspects, education and employment, tailored to each person's goals and plans, like I said early, and are they realistic and are they attainable? We had one young lady years ago, she said, well, I'm going to be an accountant, that's my goals. And we'd say, well, let's be realistic about this. You have a lengthy criminal record, a career in the accounting field might be limited due to your criminal record. And she was insistent, no, I'm getting my business diploma and I'm focusing on accounting. And what was interesting is after, she ended up getting employment with a company as an admin, and her goal was to work into an accounting position. And then we heard from her later and she said, yeah, that's just not doable with my criminal record. However, she then expanded into other areas of business administration, so that she was still able to learn from that. So supporting access to the full continuum of care, very important piece of drug court. It's providing access to that continuum of addictions and physical and mental health services. Those are supports that are going to be ongoing, even for people in long-term recovery. This is such a key component. And in drug treatment courts, we generally have the goal of abstinence, all right? Traditionally, that is the goal. However, we want to ensure that recovery and becoming free of substances is attainable, whether it's through methadone, Suboxone, a form of harm reduction. It's helping them work through those areas in a way that they can find a way to obtain the recovery that each person is eventually looking for. It's dealing with the psychological and psychiatric services to address the unresolved issues of trauma, shame, and abuse. So important. So many we have participants who are living with the effects of there's residential school survivors, childhood trauma, prostitution, even the shame of the harm that they've done to others. We have women, especially with children. One of also a long-term part-time staff. She graduated 13 years ago from drug treatment court. She works as a peer support. When she came into the program, she had 4 children. They had been in and out of foster care while she was in addiction. So she obtained custody of those children, but she's had to deal with the shame that comes with, she said, everything in my life brought this trauma into their lives too, and there is that residual effect. So learning to deal with that, and then the addictions treatment programs and services, just so important for people to have those relapse prevention plans and to develop the skills. And and tools that they need. And also, as we spoke about, the interventions to address the criminogenic thinking and behaviors. There needs to be an ongoing awareness, and part of the program is just to have them in courses that really delve into this, but also call them out on things, because they'll try to triangulate staff against each other and try to get what they want, and that's their old behaviors and thinking surfacing. That's called survival in their world. So just teaching them that there is another way that you can do this. And in this process, I just want to touch on briefly also the phases of treatment and how those phases are so important to providing structure for that recovery process, for the incremental progress. And at the end of the day, it's really, each phase is maybe 60 to 90 days, stabilization periods, pro-social, adaptive behaviors, and maintenance. But basically, it's just learning an awareness, ownership, learning about how to go forward in life, and practicing those skills. And that's really what the phases do for them. Now, in the standards of practice, we want to talk about the importance of flexibility in adjusting the drug treatment court program, delivery, and content. And every drug treatment court has a different form of presenting that content, however they do it. We just know if you're sticking to the standards, to the principles that have been developed through the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals, if your drug court is guided by those principles, you will have success. That's just reality, and it's a wonderful thing. And then within your program, you can adapt the content so it works. And one of the important things is adapting it for particular groups, such as women with children, participants with children, Indigenous participants, and other minority ethnic groups, and also specific mental health supports, and recognizing that there's barriers to serving particular groups of participants, and ensuring that we adapt our programming to accommodate that, giving priority to the Indigenous and pregnant women. It's just an equitable manner of delivering a program service. One of our women, and this is the quote from, actually, she is still a participant here. She said, "I didn't want to go into drug court because I was so scared I would not get to be with my kids, and yet I knew if I went to jail, I'd lose them. But when the staff said to me they could put me in a treatment center together with my kids," she said, "I couldn't stop crying." She said, "I was so relieved." That is one of the things that women will often try to hide their addiction for fear that they will lose their children. We're very fortunate in our province that we do have a large recovery center specific for women with children, and they get to have their children with them. They go to daycare during the day, they come back, and it's an amazing thing, and it really does speak to meeting those specific needs. So I'm going to pass along to Arla, who is my colleague and friend, absolutely brilliant woman, and she is going to speak to you about the impacts. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here today. So as Grace said, I'm going to be talking about some of the impacts that drug treatment courts have. And first of all, I just say, there is lots of research on drug treatment courts, largely out of the United States. And we know from this research that drug courts have a significant positive impact in a number of areas, including reducing drug use, reducing crime, saving costs, improving employment situation and other social determinants of health, and improving family relationships, just to name some of the key ones that stand out in the research. But today, I'd like to focus on some of the qualitative evidence. So I'll share some themes and comments from participants about things that they tell us has worked for them, and also some thoughts about what my colleagues and I who are involved in drug treatment courts observe as impacts. qualitative evidence is particularly useful for program and policy development. It helps us to incorporate the voice of people with lived experience, and it really helps to understand the complexity of the interventions that are required to effectively help the populations that we're serving in drug treatment courts. So as an example, I just wanted to start by sharing a quote that's from one of our graduates in the Calgary program. And he said, drug treatment court is what I prayed for all those years in jail, helped to change my life. And this is one that stuck with me for years because it reminds me, as Judie and Grace have both alluded to, that drug treatment courts are not just addiction treatment programs. We exist to help people substantially change how they live their lives. And this is the #1 comment we hear in the applications that we receive from people in our community about what they want. They want help to change how they're living their lives. So just to share some context, a recent survey completed by the Canadian Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals provides some helpful information about the population that's being served in Canada in drug treatment courts. And this is particularly important context for understanding impact around community safety. So we can see all programs are, not surprisingly, serving people who are addicted to a Schedule I drug. 100% are working with people facing charges for theft, property, or fraud offenses, 75 drug trafficking offenses, 50% violence-related or break and enter offenses, and 81% of programs do screen people with a violence history and work with people with some violence history. Despite the fact that drug treatment courts were initially designed to serve a non-violent population, this is a very important population for us to be serving when we can have people with a violence history being safe in the community. We know from research that that people with a violence history often performed as well or better than non-violent offenders. And so working with this population allows us to help to make an impact on the well-being of the individual and also to make an impact on community safety. So key area of impact for drug treatment courts is the social determinants of health. The Canadian Association survey I just mentioned shows that all programs in Canada are providing a wide range of services to address social determinants of health. You can see there 100% are facilitating access to supports for income and basic needs, employment and education, harm reduction, mental health, and the vast majority, almost all, are also with housing, health and disability, cultural connections, and most with social inclusion and parenting supports as well. This is an interesting, there's an interesting piece here for me. I know that drug treatment courts have received some criticism in the literature around not supporting access to harm reduction practices and services. So it was interesting for me to see that all programs are facilitating access to opioid use or substance use disorder clinics and medications, assessment and medications. And many of them also providing service to a wide range of other programs such as injectable opioid agonist therapy programs, RAM clinics, and safer use supplies. Just to mention one specific area, that's employment, and this is Calgary data. Our participants are 82% are fully unemployed when they start the program, when they enter the program. And even those who have some employment, it's typically very sporadic, a very small amount and not a sustainable income. And by the time they're discharged, 82% are employed, and that includes whether they graduate, whether they're withdraw, or whether they're otherwise discharged. So this is a quote from a participant who said, "I now understand," pardon me. Pardon me here. I now understand who I am. I have hobbies. I know what I enjoy. I have more goals than I can count. I'm closer with my family than ever with my family. And I have the most amazing relationships in my life I've ever had. Those who work with in drug treatment courts have the pleasure of hearing these kinds of comments all the time. Improved mental health. One drug court graduate said, the mental health that's been provided to me from drug court is the most important part for me. I never believed in mental health. Now I do. It's changed the person that I am. You know, drug treatment courts see a lot of people enter our programs with a significant history of abuse and trauma. In the Calgary program, 73% of our participants report a childhood history of abuse or violence. And many are also exposed to domestic violence or street violence in adulthood. So we see a lot of people suffering the effects of trauma. We also see people with a wide range of other mental health concerns. And the impacts that we have in drug treatment courts are particularly when we have people who are able to access resources to get a qualified assessment and medications for a previously undiagnosed illness. And also in pretty much all cases, people who enter the program and stop using drugs see a significant improvement in their mental health. Counseling is also very helpful in addressing the emotional and relationship issues that have repeatedly led people to self-medicate with drugs. So I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about this area of what we call behavioral health. This is a particularly important area of intervention for drug treatment courts, and some participants we see present with significant antisocial traits when they first enter the program, and but we see that significantly diminish or eliminate during their time in the program. Once people realize that they are going to be treated with respect, that they won't be judged unfairly, and that they usually start to trust, they start to open up, be willing to be a little bit vulnerable, and they, in many cases, become brutally honest about their lives and their past. And this is a really important opportunity for intervention and change. I'll just share a couple of quotes. One graduate said, I got addicted to the crime itself, getting away with it, right? Judie and Grace both spoke about this. We do see, particularly with property offenders and with prolific property offenders, that the crime and getting away with it can become compulsive. And this is a very important area to be dealt with. Another graduate became very reflective, and his comment was, I became very brash, ignorant, cocky, and overridden with a feeling of invincibility. My daily routines and ways of being exponentially magnified a long-running attitude of circumventing the system and pulling the wool over people's eyes. I thought I was some kind of gangster, chasing down and intimidating people that owed me money, creating a scene and speeding away before the police arrived. I was a child caught in a fantasy, running from his feelings, trying to control a world that was and is way bigger than I am. And this graduate became really very reflective about, he would describe his history as being drug-fueled chaos. And he spoke in great detail about the change that he'd made in his life in drug treatment court. And this is just one example of the kind of profound change in thinking and behavior that we see in drug treatment courts. Now, I just want to share a few specifics in relation to this area because there are about 4 themes in the input that we received from drug treatment court participants about what it is specifically that they experience in drug treatment court that impacts their thinking and behavior. And there are really 4 specific areas that I see. And one is caring, support, and relationships with the team. So this graduate said, I quickly learned that they weren't going to give up on me. The team made it easy to reach out, to be honest, and to be accountable. And this is a very common theme we see in the feedback from drug court participants, and specifically the relationships with the team and how that impacts how they think and feel about a wide range of things. Secondly is practicing accountability. This is a very important part of seeing improvement in this area. This graduate said, what helped me was that I remained accountable to everybody in the program. Now I'm just doing things. I don't have to talk about it every day. It's become part of who I am. And when I say accountability, I don't just mean providing sanctions and incentives. I mean really building accountability into the value system of the program. So valuing it, expecting it, encouraging it, reinforcing it, recognizing it, and talking about it. And this is a really important area of impact. Thirdly is specific evidence-informed interventions designed to address that thinking and behavior. So this is a quote from a Regina graduate who said, MRT helped me change the way I think. I don't think I'm a victim of my circumstances anymore. And MRT taught me to go from dishonesty to honesty. There are a number of these evidence-based programs that are provided by a number of programs in Canada. And they really are important for a population that has been entrenched in a criminal lifestyle for some time. And when you provide these programs, you can really observe people going through the change process. You can see them having the aha experiences. You can see them developing self-awareness of how their thinking has kept them from achieving the goals that are important to them. You can see them reflecting on and embracing more positive values and other oriented values, and you can see them actively working on the patterns of thinking and behavior. And this is a very important area of impact for this population. The last area in this impact on behavioral health is change in the perception of authority figures. So one drug treatment court graduate said, drug court opened my eyes to a whole new system. I always thought the court was authority figures, so I didn't need to listen. But it was the weirdest experience to walk into court and have judges and lawyers on your side. As drug addicts, it's ingrained in your head that they're on the other side. It's mind-blowing to see judges cry in court. It made me realize there's so many people who care. Changes in relationship with authority figures. It changes the relationships that our participants are motivated to have with law enforcement and with court members. And over time, it changes their perception of themselves. So they start to see themselves more as upstanding citizens of the community. And when identity changes in this way, behavior follows. So I'll just end, the last area of impact I would just like to speak to is self-acceptance. And this graduate said, drug treatment court literally taught me how to live again. They taught me all the tools, how to survive, how to love myself, how to get my self-esteem back. And eventually I got back everything I'd lost. I have my kids, I have my family, I love myself, I have my heart back. And you know, I'm mentioning this last because it tends to be an impact that we see later in the program when other problems and other needs have been addressed. And not everybody expresses it this way. This person has a lovely ability to express themselves. Some people, you see it in their physical presentation and quite dramatically. But you know, everybody who works in a drug treatment court has the absolute joy of hearing these kinds of comments from people. And when you hear it, you know that this person, the person who said it, has a very good chance of sustaining a much better life. So that's all we have for today for the presentation part. And on behalf of Judie, Grace, and myself, I just want to thank Justice Birns for the opportunity to share a bit of our experience.
Thank you so much to all three of you on behalf of our committee for that presentation. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of everyone that's listening learned some really interesting information as well. We do have a few questions, and please, for anybody who is watching, please feel free to put any questions you may have into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. We are monitoring them. And hopefully we'll get to as many as we can. If I could ask Judie too, if you want to turn your camera on, and then you guys can just pipe in whoever wants to answer whichever question that works great for us. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so the first question, actually, I'm going to reverse the order a bit. So one of the questions we have here is, what is the position of drug court on decriminalizing all form of drug use for personal use, like most other countries, for example, Germany, Switzerland, and others?
Well, I would just start answering that by saying I'm not aware that drug courts across the country have taken a formal position collectively on that question. I mean, it's my sense you will find lots of support for that in camps, all kinds of camps, but it's not there's not been a formal position taken that I'm aware of. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, that's, yeah, I don't know that we have one either. Yeah.
Sorry, I just lost my next question. Give me 1 second. I've lost my screen. Okay, sorry. Okay, the next question I've got here are any ideas of where to apply for funding or grants for drug treatment courts? We're a small community who run on volunteers from various organizations. And I can say, as one of the crowns in the Brampton Drug Treatment Court, which is a massive jurisdiction, we actually find ourselves in the exact same position where we too are unfunded. So any suggestions there would be really great.
Well, I mean, there is several, avenues that a person can apply. I can only speak for our province right now, and Arla and I jointly have been running both drug treatment court programs in Alberta for multiple years and have been fighting for endless hours have been put into trying to get funding, of course. And we are very fortunate that our Ministry of Justice has made the decision now to fund drug treatment courts to full capacity and expansion. So by the summer of 22, we will have 7 fully operating funded drug treatment courts in our province. I can't speak to that's it's just kind of where it's come to. It's taken a long time to get here, but I think there is more funding. It looks like more funding is coming. That probably might be in question more for the Canadian Association to speak to. I don't know, Arla or Judie, did you have more on that?
Yeah, just that the federal government did in their recently make an announcement of more funding for drug treatment courts. I think it will take some time for that to flow out. But it's hard to know what that might look like, but there's optimism there for programs that communities that are either wanting to start one up or that are currently unfunded. And in the meantime, if you're looking at other strategies, community foundations can be a source, and there's lots of good data that can be borrowed from other programs to make your case. If you're a program that hasn't been funded and haven't been able to gather data, for example, that's probably the best strategy we've been able to use for fundraising.
I think that someone just posed what I interpret to be a follow-up question to that is, where will the treatment courts be? So I'm assuming that would be out west where you guys are.
Okay, in Alberta right now, we have long-standing drug treatment court programs in Edmonton and Calgary. This last fiscal year, we opened in Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. That's in the south of the province. This fiscal year, we're currently in the process of getting Red Deer, that's central, and Grand Prairie North open. And next fiscal year, the goal is for Fort McMurray, and that's in the far north of the province. So those are the main locations right now for the drug treatment courts here.
That's awesome. That's a lot. That's great. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back to the top. So the question was, how are structural issues such as poverty, racism, homophobia, etc., dealt with?
I could speak to that briefly if you wanted to add in. And I'm just looking at the questions too. I was going to look at both questions combined in a way about drug courts, maybe not understanding the issue of colonization, genocide of children, intergenerational trauma. There's always challenges, there's always barriers to this. The biggest thing I know for us has been really being very strongly immersed I'm going to specifically speak to the Indigenous community and ensuring that our participants have access to programming and supports and resources. We're very fortunate. We work with Poundmakers Lodge Treatment Center here that is Indigenous based, very, very strong partnership. And so much of the culture and spirituality is dealt with there, and the intergenerational trauma and the genocide of children that, the recent, this genocide has just been so powerfully impacted our participants. My staff, I have 2 staff who are Indigenous, and they both have really been they've been going through a lot in this last while, coming to terms with this reality. And I had one staff, she just came in and sat down in my office and said, I'm just overcome with grief. She is comes from a background of intergenerational trauma and the reality of this. So it's just ensuring the supports are in place and that they're able to explore this in whatever way they're comfortable exploring it. This is not something that's imposed. I've had some say, no, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with that piece right now. I'm just focused on my specific recovery. Okay. But it's those community partnerships that open that door with the Indigenous community. And we are, I'm doing some work right now on researching even, can we open up some Indigenous specific drug treatment courts in our province? And it's something we've been looking into, and that's when you really can start to focus on those areas. So, if that does answer the questions of poverty and racism, yes. I mean, poverty in itself is just ensuring that our participants graduate employed, getting their education, having an opportunity to work their way out of poverty. And so I'm going to hand off to anybody else that might want to add to that.
Yeah, well, I would just add that one of the things that is addressed in the standardized programming around distorted thinking is racism is addressed in those groups, and distorted thinking around sexuality and judgment of others is addressed in those groups. They can be a great place for people to safely share their thinking and for those issues to be discussed and shift people's values and thinking about those areas, just as an example.
Okay, someone asked, I didn't quite catch the name of the therapy. I think it was moral something therapy. They wanted to know, can you talk a little bit more about that and how to access it and where to access it?
Judie.
It's actually called moral reconnection therapy. It came out of the US, developed in 1985 by Dr. Gregory Littrell and Dr. Kenneth Robinson. And they have a website you can access and see all the wonderful materials they have. They have various books on various areas of programming. So we could post that, I'm assuming, right? A link to that.
That would be great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question we've got are, what are your thoughts on keeping a DTC and a mental health court separate, or does it make more sense they be integrated or combined somehow?
Did anybody else want to speak to this? I can throw in a few. I'll just speak a little and you go ahead if you want to. It's funny, last summer I was part of a panel that presented in Jamaica. They were reviewing this in their drug treatment courts, and they were reviewing the option of mental health court, drug treatment court, can you combine, so on and so forth. And of course, there's several trains of thought on that, and expertise, and we've looked, I believe there is options for streams of treatment through every drug treatment court, and we are just finding so much of addiction is intertwined with mental health, right? That is such a big component to it. So we're looking, even though it's drug treatment court, we are dealing with mental health issues on an ongoing basis. So the two you do have to take into consideration in treatment, in case planning, those always come into play. So that's just a brief, I don't know, Arla or Judie, did you have more on that?
Yeah, I don't see any reason they can't be combined. It's a matter of how you go about that, how your programs are designed, and how you. I would say it's a matter of how you maintain the integrity of the program model for each arm of that to make sure that the programming you're providing is effective. So that your whatever is needed to be different in order to follow the evidence for each program is important that those are sustained.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. Perhaps I'll give one last moment if anyone has anything else that they want to add in there. If not, I'll invite Justice Barnes to come back and wrap up and say thank you.
Well, what can I say? Thank you. Arla, Grace, and Judie, thank you. That was absolutely fantastic, very informative, and thank you for taking the time to share. As you know, we are probably going to, actually most definitely going to try and get you back again to talk on some topics. So thank you so very much. Next month, we will be tackling the issue of concurrent disorders. And in fact, it was that question on the integration of mental health and drug treatment was an appropriate segue. In Durham, they have a combined drug treatment called mental health court to some extent. And at some point, we are hoping to do a feature on the Peterborough concurrent disorder court to sort of see how that works. So having said that, thank you to everybody. And thank you for joining us. And one last thing, do not hesitate to let us know what topic you want us to cover, anything that you think will assist us and others in our professional development. Arla, Grace, Judie, on behalf of everybody, thank you. And on that basis, we'll end. Okay, have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.